Welcome back to another edition of Root to Rising, a podcast that creates platforms to allow women to hear stories from other women that have experiences to really learn, empower themselves, and to have the knowledge to find their happiness or find their professional and or personal journey. So today I have a guest with me, Phyllis, who comes to me with meeting her in my professional journey in my career. I'm going to throw it to Phyllis to introduce herself, but we're honored to have Phyllis on the show because she has a very extensive journey that she can share with us today. So Phyllis, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Christine. So my name's Phyllis, and I have worn lots of hats. I'm a pharmacist by training. I'm a wife, a mother, a grandmother, go by Nana. I am a volunteer, and I'm a friend. And so I weave all of those things together. I am retired now, but I got bored, so I went back and started doing some consulting.
Which I knew it was going to happen, by the way.
I know.
But you get to travel and then you get to work and then you get
That's
to
right. I
travel.
get to travel and work and play with my grandkids and
And it's
exercise
funny,
more and all that.
when I asked Phyllis to make sure, I said, introduce yourself or have your brand. She's like, I don't have a brand, but you just rattled all that off. And that was your brand. So, Phyllis, can you maybe describe your journey in the professional, like when it started, when you started, maybe graduated college? Said you were a pharmacist, so obviously you went to pharmacy school, but maybe walk us through when you wanted to be a pharmacist, what decisions you were thinking about, and what or how did you know that you wanted that to be your profession?
So it's interesting because I originally wanted to be a physician. And when I was in junior high, high school, I don't quite know exactly. But anyway, for people that liked science, they had this physician go and talk. And he stood up there and said, women who want to be physicians can't be married and have children.
My goodness gracious.
Yeah.
Hence the podcast.
Hence the podcast. And unfortunately for me, I believed him because at the time I didn't know any female physicians. So I knew I wanted to have kids at some point. So I was like, well, I guess I can't do this. And then I had a chemistry teacher who said, well, what about pharmacy school? And he's like, USC is having this night and you and your parents should go and you can learn about it. They have this really great clinical program and blah, blah, blah. So I went. I thought it was really interesting. It sort of gave me physician adjacent. And so I decided to go to pharmacy school. So I went to USC for 2 years undergrad and with a summer school and then went right into pharmacy school.
So going back to your decision to wanting to be a physician, where did that come from? I mean, to your point, if that doctor stood up in that classroom and he pretty much said this isn't going to happen for any women. So how did you get that idea? Like, why did you want to be that if that wasn't normal back?
Think because my mom got breast cancer when I was 12 and my dad worked shifts, and so there were times when I had to take care of her. And I didn't want to be a nurse because I didn't like that part of it, but I liked the whole healthcare, medicine, science. I was like a science person. Don't make me write an English paper. I like to read, but I don't want to write an essay. And so I think that's just where it sort of started.
Got it. No, that's fast. That was my next question is why not nurse if that was the stereotype back then, but that wasn't for you, right?
Mm-mm. I'm more
So when you,
ambitious. I'm more ambitious than that, which you know because you know me, but
I know.
I am. I'm ambitious and I always wanted to like have the next job and the next job. And my pharmacy career was pretty unconventional, at least from when I graduated. I would never have thought that I did everything I have now done.
Where did that ambition come from? Did it come from your parents? Did it come from your friends? Did it come from school? Like, where did it come from?
I think my parents, it's interesting. I was talking to my best friend about this and we both had it was never if you were going to college, it was where you were going to go to college. I mean, there was no discussion that you were not going to go. And I think that came mostly, well, my mom was a teacher, so that
Okay.
was part of it.
Yep.
My dad was really dogmatic in a way that I have a younger sister that both of us have a career, go to college, and have some a way to support ourselves and our families if at some point we were alone in that journey. And that came from his childhood. I mean, my dad grew up in the Depression. His parents got divorced. His mom was a waitress, had 4 kids.
Got it.
And eventually they had to go live with their father because she didn't have any money. She couldn't support them.
Yeah. So he didn't want you to have that
He didn't want us.
hypothetically.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was kind of a backup plan back then, I guess, right? Just in case things didn't work out in terms of who you
Yeah.
married and who
But
else
it
was
also,
supporting you.
I think it also was he just felt education was really important. He almost graduated from college, but didn't finish. And that decision
Mm.
cost him jobs and he ended up doing something he didn't really want to do. And so I think he had a lot of regrets about that and didn't want us to be in that position.
So it's a combination of he wanted you to be independent, not reliant if something happened, being in a marriage or having kids. And then second, he probably had a little bit of regret or resentment and wanted more opportunity for you
Yeah.
because
I
he
mean,
didn't finish
he
college.
was
Yeah.
always, I don't want you to go to a job that you hate every day, right? Like you need to have something that you have passion about, that you like doing, that you can also support yourself, right? Like if you're passionate about, I don't know, whatever, and you can't sing, like
Right.
that's not a good option, right? Because you can't support yourself. But, liking what you do and finding that dream and then following it.
Yep. And so I talk about that in a couple podcasts prior to yours that you have to find your motivators. And it doesn't necessarily mean like your example of singing that you're going to become a professional singer. However, if that's one of your motivators where you love singing and music, some way, shape, or form that needs to be incorporated into something you're doing every day, if it's professionally or in some way, to make yourself get that energy to be able to provide energy
Yes.
back. So
Yeah.
so I'm going to go on. You talked to, you were in a classroom. The physician that was teaching the class said, no, you're a woman, can't be a teacher because how would you take care of your kids? So, what made you go to your chemistry teacher though? So, it sounds like
He
you went to
didn't.
your
He
chemistry.
approached me.
He did. So, what he heard the other physician
He-
presenting?
And then he's like, you should do this. Like, you're really good at this stuff. You should do this. There's a lot of chemistry in pharmacy.
Wow. So, he heard what you had asked, and then he proactively went to you and he
And
offered you that solution.
it wasn't at the same time, right? It was later. So maybe
Interesting.
I told him or something. I don't honestly remember, but
Yeah.
I know he is the one who came to me and said, what about this?
That's super cool. And one of the reasons I asked that is because I'm trying to have the younger generation of women that are just graduating to put themselves out there to say, ask the questions they want to ask, talk to people to learn more information. So that's where I went there. Sounds like the chemistry teacher then offered you to go to this
And
pharmacy
he
learning
found out
the
that there
school.
was this open house and he's like, you and your parents should go. And I was really nervous. I was like, I don't know. And then I thought, well,
Yeah,
I guess why not? And then I got all excited about it and just decided this is what I was going to do until I, didn't do well in analytical chemistry in college. And I was like, oh my gosh, maybe I can't do this. And I was like, oh,
of
come on.
course. Because the one thing we do wrong, then we think we're not cut out for
That's
it, right?
right. That's right.
So you were nervous. What made you go? What made you change that nervousness to excitement? Like, how did you get over that hump? Because I would argue today there's a lot of younger women out there that they feel like there's so many barriers or challenges coming their way and they can't get over that hump. If it's
Well, my
social
parents helped
anxiety.
me get over the
Okay.
hump. I told them
Okay.
about it and they're like, good idea. We're going.
So you need some kind of support to make
Yeah,
sure that
because
they help.
it was meant to be not just you by yourself. It was meant to be like it was for high
Okay.
school students and their parents. So it was meant to be that, but I think that helped. Had it been me like having to drive there myself, it probably wouldn't have happened.
Interesting. So it's important to have supporters. Tell other
Yes.
people your motivators, your vision, so they can help support you get past that hump, if you will.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
To the you obviously went to pharmacy school and you obviously finished because you're a pharmacist today. So tell us what you did after pharmacy school.
So I
What was your
did
first
a
job?
residency for a year, and then because I wanted to do hospital pharmacy because I wanted to do clinical stuff. I wanted to
Okay.
be at the bedside, take care of patients, blah, blah, blah. So I did some version of hospital pharmacy, started at, bedside stuff, worked in an IC, ran a drug utilization program. Then I was like, okay, I don't want to work all these crazy shifts anymore. Did drug information. And then I moved sort of into management. And I was in hospital pharmacy for 15 years. And then I moved into I got a job in managed care as a pharmacy director. And then I went to work for a medical group. And then I went to work for industry because I thought the medical group was going to go bankrupt. And at that point, I was a single parent and there was no way, like, I needed a job, right? And so I went to work for, like I said, for industry, and I worked for a very large pharmaceutical company for 11 years. It started in a clinical role and then moved into an account management role, which was basically like negotiating contracts and doing all of that stuff. And then went to work for a startup pharmaceutical company, which was a very different experience because I was used to having infrastructure and they had none. And I did that. I had a mentor along the way. So a guy that I worked with twice at the big place went to the small place and reached out and said, "You want this job?" And he said, "You still have to interview. The other people have to like you. But if they like you, then you have this job." So I did that. And I did that for like 6 years. And I started again on the managed care side. And then eventually led trade and distribution, and then was, after he left, was sort of this interim VP of market access. And then the place culture changed for me and it wasn't a good fit anymore. So then I ended up in healthcare consulting with a small firm. And when I retired, I'd been a partner for a couple years. So I've done a lot of different things that I would not have thought possible when I graduated from pharmacy school.
Oh, it's interesting. You make your journey so nonchalant. Like, oh, well, I was a pharmacist in the hospital and then I decided to go into the administration part and then I went to managed care. So you make it sound very simple, all those transitions. And you definitely, even though they were all clinical, they were very different in nature, right? Clinical care to a patient, now you're administration, now you're in managed care. So tell me a little bit about, like, how did you identify that you could do something different that you weren't probably comfortable doing? You didn't necessarily have experience doing. What pushed you to go to that transition of the career path that you thought, again, when you started, you wanted that direct patient care?
Well, part of it was hospitals. It was like every time I turned around, like, how are you going to cut this? How are you going to cut it? And it was like just a budget exercise and laying people off. I also, and I know you talked about this on another podcast, women can be wonderful mentors or women can be really awful to other women. And I was in the latter situation and I had to get out. So I tried to figure out what else I could do. And I had some experience with managed care with our outpatient pharmacy and their, contracts with payers. And I leveraged some people that I knew to get me an interview and I got the job. I think that's
Good
the
for
other
you.
thing is when you're trying to do something like that, you have to leverage anybody that you know to get your foot in the door. Because if I felt like once I got my foot in the door for an interview, I could usually prove myself. But if they looked at what you did and you didn't have that experience, it was, why would I even talk to you?
So I'm hearing that a lot from the people that just graduated college, right? It's a very tough and competitive job market out there. A lot of companies are telling not just women, but men and women, you need experience, right? Before they
Yes.
want to hire you.
And
One
how do
of
you
the
get
things,
that?
right? How do you get that without anyone hiring you? One of the things I talk about is create your network, which you just, talked about. I'm going to ask you how you do that, but it's not about so much what you know, it's about who you know. And then in that situation, when you see the opportunity, how do you use your network to help get you that job? So maybe can you talk to us a little bit about how did you build your network of people? How did you stay in touch with that network? And then how do they all of a sudden offer you a job, or how do they all of a sudden recommend you for a job? How did they help you? How did you create that?
Uh, So, I mean, part for me, part of it has just been like right place, right time, which is not strategic, but it does happen, and you have to be able to like take advantage of it. So, I knew someone at the company I was trying to go work for who was a high level person, and I just said, "Could you like help me get an interview? Could you at least put my name in and say that you know me? Like, you don't have to be glowing, right? Just," and he was willing to do that. And so I think that's part of it. And I think being like when I went at my big company, from being when I went to pharma, I went into this sort of clinical role because at the time people were
Yeah.
saying pharma was the dark side from,
Right.
Star Wars. And so I went into this clinical role, and then I was like, God, I'm not loving this because one day I'm talking about this, one day I'm talking about this, one day I mean, I'm scattered all over the board, all kinds of customers. I just wanted to have a focus, and I wanted to have a focus on managed care because I liked it,
Hmm.
and they were going to have a clinical role to support the account manager. And I was like, perfect. That's what job I want. I'm going to apply for it. And then my boss calls me and she says, well, there's an account manager job open.
Oh boy.
Why don't you apply for that? And I'm like, I've never done that. And she's like, I know, but you would be really good. I've already talked to Bob, and Bob has put in a good word with the hiring guy. And so why don't you call him and find out more about the job? So I called, sent a message, called the guy to try to find out more about the job. The next thing I know, I'm scheduled for an interview. I was like, okay. And then I met with him, blah, blah, blah. And I met with his boss. And she was a very tough person on the exterior, but once you got to know her, she really wasn't like that. And I'll never forget what she said to me. She goes, does this make you nervous? Because I was going from, being a clinical person to negotiating contracts. And oh, by the way, the account they were going to give me was one of the biggest managed care plans in the country. And I said, honestly, yes. And she said, well, I'd be worried if you weren't nervous.
What a great mentor to have. Ooh, I got goosebumps.
I
That's
know.
awesome.
And I got the job. And so I think it was sort of
Why do you think you got it? You never did account management. They gave you the biggest account. Why do you think there's three people in that scenario that believed in you and that supported you? Why do you think you got it?
because I understood how managed care worked. I had sat on the other side of the table, which was the argument I made about why I could do this, is
Mm,
I'd been on the receiving end of this. I'd been a pharmacy director at a managed care plan. So I know what that person thinks, and I have credibility with that person in a way that someone that has never had their job
good for
doesn't.
you. Good for you. So it's differentiating yourself, right? You
Yeah.
took an experience that you had, knowing that, again, you have other candidates that are competing for the same job. Most likely, people didn't have the direct clinical
Yeah,
experience,
absolutely.
and you focused on the differentiator, which, again, I communicate to all people out there. It doesn't have to be an experience you're having, but it could be something else, like a personal characteristic. You have to differentiate yourself when a job recruiter or a job hiring manager is talking to someone. They see thousands of resumes, they talk to hundreds of people.
Yep.
So don't make yourself like everyone else. Focus on really your motivators, your skill set, and figure out a way to differentiate that and to personalize that with whomever you're talking to.
Right. And there was a guy who was the pharmacy director at one of the plans who was just notorious. I mean, everyone knew his name, and I knew him very well. And I said, I can go in and he will talk to me. He will make time for me. We can have a good conversation. And at the end of the day, if we can also agree to disagree and walk
Okay.
away, and we
Yeah.
still have a great relationship, and I
Yeah.
can go back again.
Yeah. Good for you. I mean, that takes a lot of courage, a lot of credibility. So, congrats on that. I have to ask as we round out your professional journey conversation and transition on, do you have any regrets? If you could go back in time to be a physician, do you wish you would have moved forward and still gone to be a physician, even though that teacher in that moment said no?
Not right now, but many times, yes.
throughout your
I
career?
would beat myself up about how could I be so stupid to listen to some old guy who didn't, I mean, really, who didn't really know. Because there were
Yeah.
women when I was in pharmacy school and I was doing my residency, there were women in their residencies that, and so, I mean, it was a ridiculous comment. And I just wasn't confident enough at the time to not believe him.
But it's also, I think, significant to know when you're that vulnerable or not confident, when one person, it doesn't matter who this person is, says something negative or hurtful, how it impacts you. And a lot of times it's very hard to recover from that. And
Mhm.
so a lot of people that, I speak with, they are getting feedback at their end of year reviews that is maybe as a female too direct, right? Or she's too direct. Or you get feedback if you didn't get a job that you didn't have, a growth mindset. So again, the communication I give to everyone is it's not just that one person's perspective that you need to care about. That shouldn't change your trajectory of what you want to do or what your motivators are. Take it with a grain of salt, move on, because there's different people across your
That's
life
right.
and career that are going to give you positive and negative feedback, but you have to learn to be confident enough, and you have to be learn to let it go and take what helps you and release what hurts you.
Yep.
I think you'd be a great physician, but I know Phyllis in terms of her negotiating skills and her managed care skills, and she excelled in that realm also. So if we transition a little bit, just to kind of compare, Phyllis, you have three daughters, right? And so they're in their 30s and 40s, correct? Yeah, so a little bit of a generation difference between 30 and 40-year-olds versus now the 20-year-olds that are graduating college. You have a pretty cool perspective where you sit, right? Because you have now retired, you have a semi retired, you have a very successful professional career journey. You had a lot of different challenges throughout your career. Your daughters, which, I'd love to hear about some of the challenges they've had, and then how does that compare in your mind to what these 20-year-olds women are graduating college and what they're dealing with? So maybe we'll start with your daughters, raising three daughters. What was that like? And throughout their journeys, what challenges did they have to overcome and how did they do that?
Yeah. So, my 3 daughters are from a blended family. My husband had 2 girls and I had a boy and a girl, but we've raised them together since they were teenagers. So they're mine. But I think none of them are in healthcare. They're all in very different careers. I think the oldest one had challenges. She and I are a lot alike, even though she's not my biological daughter. And she's always been very motivated. She's really smart. She does all this stuff. And she graduated and then she went back and got her master's because she found what she wanted to do. And then got married to her high school sweetheart and then had her first child and got feedback not from me or my husband or her dad or from her husband that, you're very fortunate. You don't have to work financially. And so you shouldn't go back because no one will watch your child and give them the love that you do. And she was just like beside herself.
Mm.
She called me and I'm like, honey, the people that are giving you that feedback didn't work. I worked. I had to work. But my children, my biological children now say, Mom, you gave us the perspective that you can work and be a good mother.
Mhm.
And you were a really great role model for us. And oh, by the way, you would have been terrible as a stay at home mother. You would have been miserable and it would not, I mean, and it's true, right?
It's true. I would have been the worst stay at home
And
mother.
my daughter, my biological daughter is exactly that way. She's the same way. Um, but so we just talked it through and she went back and she had guilt. Um, the
Did she
other
have
two,
guilt? Did she have guilt before they said that?
no,
So she
I
got
don't
the
think
guilt.
so. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure she probably had a little bit like, how am I going to balance it and all of this stuff? But it was something she wanted to do. And my son-in-law was really supportive. Like, if this is what you want to do, you went to school and
Yeah.
you go, you do it.
What was her job? What was her profession?
She works at a university in like student affairs, managing
Okay.
all of that. So she deals with college students all
Yep.
the time.
Yep. That's awesome. Yeah. So
So,
then she
it
now
was,
had this guilt. Yeah.
yeah. And I think all of us who work have guilt, who have children. And I don't know that there's work-life balance. There's work-life management. And some days or weeks, you're like, you have a problem at work and you're like all in here. And some days or weeks, you have some family stuff going on and you're
Yep.
all in here.
Yep.
And hopefully over time it balances out.
Yep. You take the average or the mean, and
Yeah,
then hopefully you've showed up to both profession and family as the way that, you want to. And I think there are women that if you prefer to stay home and that motivates you and that's what you want to
absolutely.
do, go for it, right? But then I think we as professional women and mothers should not pass judgment if they choose that option. Just
Absolutely.
as the stay-at-home mom, like in your daughter's scenario, shouldn't have passed judgment upon your daughter to say, no one can raise your kid better than you. To your earlier comment, let's just support each other wherever we want to be and wherever we
That's
want
right.
to go. And it doesn't have to individually work for you or make sense to you logically. Just support each other and respect everyone's decision on what your motivators are.
Yeah. And I mean, if someone wants to do that, kudos to them because it's not an easy job,
No,
you
no,
know?
I could never do it. Yeah, couldn't do it. Better mom that I'm working. Agreed.
Yeah. So, and then I think the other ones have had different challenges. The other ones haven't had the position the other two are not in the position that not working is a choice, right? Like financially, they need to work. So it takes sort of that burden of the choice
Yeah,
piece away.
interesting. When it's a need, then there's no guilt or judgment, but when it's a want, all of a sudden there's judgment, right?
Yeah.
Which
Which
isn't
is
fair.
unfortunate.
It is very unfortunate. So, what would you give, knowing your experience, the challenges you had now with your three daughters, working through their challenges? What would be advice that you'd give this younger generation coming into a very competitive job market, graduating college where it's also very competitive? I mean, it's even competitive when they're in high school, like the amount of tutoring they do for
Yes.
ACT and SATs, all of the activities you have to have on this resume before you even get into college, and then to even get an internship you have to do this whole laundry list of things. So it's very overwhelming. I would say you have also now this mix of social media that comes into play and influence with social media, which maybe we didn't have as much growing up or in our professional journey. And then you have probably an outcome of all that is the social anxiety that some people start to have in terms of things are so overwhelming when they're in a group setting or just having that human connection and conversation like you and I are having, which is very easy for you and I. But people today that have mostly interacted on social media or maybe not as much
Yeah.
verbal communication, it's difficult when you go out and get a job, right? So what advice would you give to those that are graduating and kind of figuring out what am I going to do? How am I going to figure out? And they're just completely overwhelmed.
Think I think one of the things, and I touched on it before, is figure out what motivates you, what you love, and follow your passion. Don't let someone talk you out of it. And try to find people to support you, whether it's your parents. I mean, I have a friend now and her daughter's starting college in just graduated from high school. And it was oh my gosh, doing that I was like, oh my gosh, it's been so long since my kids did that. And it was so overwhelming.
How would you tell younger generation of women to gain confidence? So they're overwhelmed, but they're also questioning everything they do, right? So how would you suggest they gain confidence or what kind of situations should they put themselves in to gain that confidence?
Hard. I think if you can put yourselves either in a academic situation where you do well. So if you know that that's an area that you succeed, then that's a way to build confidence, right? You do well academically. If you're more of a social person, do some volunteer stuff. Or if you're not a social person, if you're a little bit of an introvert like I was, force yourself to go into those situations, even if it's uncomfortable, because you grow and you get
Yep.
more confidence.
Yep.
I think, and I think the other thing is try to find a mentor or find someone to be it doesn't have to be one person. Like it can be a person, but you really do need a cheerleader. I mean, I have
Yep.
to say I talked about my dad a lot, but my mother was one of my biggest cheerleaders always. I changed schools when I was elementary to junior high. So when I went to junior high, I didn't know people. And she's like, it's not that people don't like you, Phyllis. It's just they have their group.
They don't.
They don't know you and they don't really think they need you. You're the one that needs people. So you're the one that has to put yourself out there. And like this was beating a dead horse forever for her. And it finally worked, right? Just like in believing that that was important. You had to put yourself out there. And I think so. And then if you meet people I think you need mentors that are older than you, like a generation. I think you need mentors sort of within maybe not if you're a freshman, maybe you don't need another freshman mentor, but you need someone who's relatively your age so that you feel like they understand you. And I think the other thing, I think what's hard now is you said social media. I mean, you can go down a rabbit hole and the environment can be really toxic. And, it's hard to stay off, but I think people have to really realize, like, step back and say, is this doing more harm? You can network that way,
Right.
but you could also get bullied and all kinds of horrible things.
Yeah, I think there's a time and a place for social media and know when to pull back and say, what's the ROI that I'm going to get out of this long term if I continue to scroll, right? Or
Yeah,
if
exactly.
I continue to get likes, what is that going to do for me, right? And your comment on mentoring, I talk about that in previous podcasts. And mentoring someone that you find someone that is in an industry or the job profession that are your motivators that you want to be in. So, for example, if you wanted to be in healthcare, you find someone, a nurse, a physician, a pharmacist, and have them mentor you, right? And have them give you the motivation at the same time as that they're mentoring you because that's in that industry that you strive for. If you have an interest in sports media, find a mentor that is a sports media. And people do want to mentor one another. You don't have to know the person as a piece of advice. Reach out to people on LinkedIn, reach out to people
Yeah.
in a group setting and put yourself out there. And then one thing you said before we wrapped up is it's okay to be uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
So it's not going to always feel good.
No.
And I think you and I align on this that when you're uncomfortable, that's when you grow. If you do
Yes.
the same thing all the time and you're comfortable, you're going to be the same person at the same state today and tomorrow. So it's okay to be uncomfortable. And I think it's really linked closely, though, with confidence, right? So you can be uncomfortable, but you also have to be confident enough to be uncomfortable
Yeah.
and
I
have that
agree.
icky feeling inside. But it's okay that you have that. It doesn't always have to feel good, right?
Right. Right. When I was in college, my best friend got me this job where I went to school. And it was like university affairs. And literally, we were the hosts at parties for donors. We wrote
Hmm,
invitations. We managed events at football games. I
that's
mean, at the
fun.
time, you had to wear a skirt unless it was below 50 degrees. I mean, it was insane. But I told the woman that ran that organization what I wanted to do. She gave me an introduction to the dean of the pharmacy school, who had a meeting where I went down and met him. And he became a mentor for me all through pharmacy school, and we stayed close until he passed away. And
Awesome.
it was just sort of a connection that I would not have ever known.
But as I listened to your overall story, something you did throughout your whole story is you always were proactive to communicate to people what you wanted to do or where you wanted to go. From the second you were in that classroom with that physician teacher that said, you said, I want to be a physician. And he said, no. fine, but you shared that, right? Then you had conversations with your other mentors and you were always proactive of sharing your story. And really that's the crux of this podcast is stories like you, right? Be vulnerable, share your story, share other stories so that you can make a path for yourself and others can learn from it. So now that
Yeah.
I'm listening to that, that's something that you definitely did to pave your way.
No, you're right. I mean, if I look back, I did.
Yeah, you did. Well, we're going to wrap up, Phyllis. Are there any final words or advice you give to those younger generation of women out there that are paving the way just like you did?
Don't give up.
Yeah.
Don't give up. And even when it's hard, just focus on what you want. And if it changes over time, that's okay too. But just don't let someone outside talk you out of your dream.
Thank you for your time. This was an awesome perspective that you've given. And we're going to wrap up today's Root to Rising podcast. Thanks for everyone. I push and urge everyone to share your story to allow others to grow.
Thanks, Christine.